You said vulnerability. What's your take on men that take the stance that you should never be vulnerable, especially in front of a woman, because they'll use that against you? Vulnerability is a weakness.
Well, it depends how you define vulnerability. I don't think any of the men that actually say that believe that. I mean, maybe they have their own definition of it, but vulnerability is just honesty. That's all it is. It's presence. It's just being here right now with what's true for me. That's all it is. I think some men think they associate it with weakness, but weakness is really deception, right? Self-deception. And that's not trustable. So I think vulnerability is just being real and being honest. And I really don't know any man that wouldn't agree with that statement. Like, do you want to be real and honest? Of course I do. Well, that's vulnerable, right? I mean, I interviewed Andrew Tate, we talked about that, but before, and I think he's incredibly vulnerable. I think there's a part of him that's not vulnerable, but the fact that he puts himself out there and says what he thinks, I think is actually vulnerable. He's opening himself up to attack. Now, I think there's aspects of himself that are defended, if I was psychoanalyzing him. But I think the people that we admire the most are the most vulnerable, like Leonidas and in 300. I mean, he's incredibly vulnerable. And that moment he puts down his shield, right, at the end of the movie, it's like, it's so powerful because he's letting himself be vulnerable. And it's very moving, I mean, I'll never forget that moment. He puts down the shield, as a symbol, as a metaphor, what that means. And suddenly it's like we feel more of him. We actually, like, it's in that moment that he demonstrates the most courage. So for me, vulnerability is a strength. Vulnerability is power. And it's just vulnerability, as I said, it's just being honest and real.
You mentioned Andrew Tate. That conversation you had with him, the second one in particular, was really fascinating. He had some pretty insightful things to say, and I think, yeah, you're right. Vulnerable in some ways, maybe guarded in other ways. But what's Andrew Tate like in real life?
He's a big sweetie pie.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, at least with me, I'm a little older than him, and so and he was very respectful to me. But I found him warm and friendly and gregarious and welcoming and funny and playful. He's just a big kid.
He is playful.
Yeah.
You can see that. He's cheeky.
Yeah, he's cheeky. And I think he's enjoying his life and he's having fun. And, he's been given an extraordinary gift with his intellect and his physical stature and the way he looks. I mean, he's right out of a movie or a comic book or something. And I think he knows that. Like, he has an understanding of who he is and how he impacts the world. So there is a degree of self-awareness that is really interesting. Like, he understands his power. Now, imagine having that kind of power. What do you do with it? And my sense is that he's not always sure what to do. I mean, which I understand. Like, what do you do when you're Andrew Tate? You're like, you have all of that. How do you wield that power? And I think that was really what I was trying to get at in the conversation with him. It's, pushing him towards, like, are you using your power effectively? Like what's next for you? Like, what fear do you have to confront? Like, is there another level? Are you not taking responsibility for certain things in your life? Like, could you step up and be more? And I found him, particularly in the interview, he was very open. And I mean, from my perspective, I understand on the outside looking in, you could look at it and say, well, he was guarded and he rationalized and he was avoiding. Okay, all of that was true, but he gave me a ton of openings. He said things, I was shocked that he said them, because he had to know that when he said that thing, that was an invitation for me to come in. And so I found him, like open and willing, a lot more open and willing than a lot of the other people I've interviewed, to be honest. I mean, or just clients that I have, you know. Obviously it was being taped, and so there's a performance to it, and both of us are storytellers, so, you know, we understand that we're creating something, so that's a part of it. But you know, I like Andrew.
Yeah. Did you receive some backlash for doing that, especially like kind of coming from, you know, Hollywood and the popular portrayal of Andrew Tate in particular as a womanizer, a potential person that's sex trafficking girls all through Europe? And I know his stance on that. It's the Matrix trying to take him down. What was it like to step into the fire? It was relatively shortly after he got out of jail. Did you feel like that was putting your reputation on the line a little bit? It's this cancel by association thing. Did you receive backlash?
Listen, I voted for Trump twice. I was like, I'd already gone through the fire. And I was out about it. And so Hollywood already rejected me.
Okay.
A lot of my friends rejected me. So the time I got to Andrew Tate,
You were like,
nobody was surprised. It was,
Okay.
you know.